right, we have a few brand new exciting game updates to discuss today for some anticipated titles that will be headed to Nintendo Switch 2, and we are starting this conversation with Metroid Prime 4, my most anticipated game of 2025 by far, and probably my most anticipated game for years now, because obviously we saw this originally teased in 2017 and we know the story since then. We have this game officially rated from the ESRB. Presumably it's content complete, and hopefully this will put to bed some of the worry that's been spotted online around this slipping into 2026. Not to mention, we have to really unpack where this game could now fall in Nintendo's release schedule, since Kirby is the November game, and that doesn't necessarily mean Metroid can't also be a November game, but I'll share my thought process on that a little bit more in detail. And this game is slated to have in-game purchases, which has the internet talking, and we need to kind of clear up what that could actually mean. Then we do have Hollow Knight Silksong exact release date. It's way sooner than probably many, including myself, were expecting. And there is a lot of new gameplay footage surfacing for this game at the ongoing Gamescom 2025 events. So definitely need to cover that with you all. And then a big update to a story we talked about yesterday, which has to do with Elden Ring's performance on Nintendo Switch 2. And while this is not yet a good news confirmation that the game's gonna like run awesome in handheld mode or anything, it does appear that handheld mode is the only one suffering from noticeable issues, as now we actually have some legit docked gameplay footage to look at, and lots of different reports from people who have been playing it docked, reporting that those same kind of frame dips and issues are not actually a problem. But I do want to kind of dive into what this means in terms of select third-party ports for Switch 2, and what to expect in terms of quality this generation potentially with these as a whole, and what it also means for Elden Ring at the end of the day as we get closer to learning about this game's potential launch date. But we'll unpack all of these details. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick off this conversation right over at VGC, where you can see their write-up. Metroid Prime 4 has been rated by the ESRB. This is the game's latest major rating board to cover the game, and you have here, while the listing is yet to appear on the ESRB website, the Nintendo Switch eShop store listing for the game has been updated. Until this week, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond has appeared with an RP for rating pending symbol alongside any new marketing materials. Now the same materials have been updated to reflect what appears to be its final rating, T for Teen. While ratings news is rarely an indicator of exact release date, it does suggest that we are likely to hear news about the game soon. This is the latest major ratings board to cover the game, following the news from July that South Korea's classification board has also rated it. Nintendo published the latest Metroid Prime 4 trailer in March. According to the trailer, the game was still planned to release on Nintendo Switch sometime this year. And they have since had investor briefings and everything else reconfirming 2025 is indeed still the slated release date. And nothing has been communicated about any kind of delay for this game. Granted, we learned about that 2025 date as early as March, and there have been some behind the scenes murmurings of like Nintendo maybe having some kind of development anomaly with this type of game, getting it to the finish line, and there's all types of fear until we get an exact release date slapped on it from Nintendo that this may slip into 2026. And of course, that's a valid fear with how long we've been waiting for this game to ultimately come out. However, I still am on the mindset and belief that Nintendo will be holding a September mainline direct presentation, and I think that that's where this game shows up. And listen, I actually think that there's still a solid chance that this game could actually be saved for something like an additional November game, because Nintendo does like to stack their holiday seasons. Maybe a very late October game, and or we could even see this as a December title. And if you start to think, well, that's too many games coming out potentially in the same window of each other, like December might be Age of Imprisonment, Hyrule Warriors, of course. The thing is that Nintendo is actually technically supporting 2 console libraries right now, and while Kirby Air Riders was confirmed to be the big holiday November 20th game, we could have an early November release for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and that's still technically a Switch 1 title that's getting a Switch 2 edition. So there's nothing that says that Nintendo won't put and double up 2 first-party games in the same month, especially in the holiday season and especially in a cross-generational period like they are in right now. Because if they do not do another November game or a late October game in that similar time slot, they're essentially skipping up the Switch 1 install base of 150 plus million consoles that could potentially be eligible or would want to go out and buy this Metroid Prime game, which of course you actually know Nintendo wants to recoup some profit on this thing and really get Metroid elevated to a new level of sales with this outing from Prime 4. And clearly, with how long it's been in development and knowing that it restarted development at a certain point in 2019, like, yeah, there's been a lot of dollars spent by Nintendo into this game, and there's no doubt that they're going to do everything they can to market it and give it the best sales push that they possibly can. Holiday window, I like the probability of that, and I do think that a late October game or early November are kind of my two most likely predictions in my head right now. Of course, you know, it being so close to September, I can't imagine us having an early September direct and learning that it's a late September game. So I really feel like that's off the table. October could be open at any point, but I feel like if they were gonna do it, it would be super late October, and that early November or even a December early game slot in December potentially being the biggest time frames that I think Nintendo could drop this thing. And if it is a November or December game, I do also think that there's still that possibility that at something like a mainline September Nintendo Direct, we could see them shadow drop Prime 2 and 3, similar to what they did with Pikmin 1 and 2 in the build up to Pikmin 4's release. It got pretty close to Pikmin 4's release, and they said, here's those HD GameCube remasters in one bundle pack. The physical version was out later, but they were literally shadow dropped at a direct. This is our last hope for Prime 2 and 3 to be remastered at the upcoming direct, and I certainly hope Nintendo doesn't leave those games behind and ask you to start playing Prime 4, a numbered game in the franchise, when you can't easily play Prime 2 and 3, yet they chose to remaster Prime 1. So I still like the chances of that personally, and I do think that a shadow drop of those games at a September direct and then maybe the physical edition a couple weeks later would be something that would still make some level of sense from Nintendo. Then the other thing that has people talking online, as you can see, fellow content creator Super Metal Dave 64, shout outs to them. He said, Metroid Prime 4 has in-game purchases listed with the rating. Oh boy, I'm going to buy it, aren't I? Either that or Nintendo may have a premium edition with all that content included. So because this does show up in-game purchases, of course, that means that there is some additional content that can be purchased from the game. However, Nintendo does point out here, yeah, like, don't read too far into it, because Donkey Kong Bonanza had that as well. And they are basically putting that disclaimer there just because you need NSO to actually play the online game chat features of the game that would allow you to game share with somebody and then play as Pauline in the game in its co-op mode. So we can't really say this is any kind of proof that Metroid Prime 4 has DLC coming for it, or that it's even an indication that we would get something like an online multiplayer mode, or that it supports some kind of NSO content because of online multiplayer being there. Now, that could still be the case. It's definitely not off the table, and Nintendo is known to surprise us with things that are included in games, sometimes last minute from when they come out. So that is a possibility. But that said, it is still interesting that we haven't seen any kind of inclination of a multiplayer mode even teased. So in-game purchases, it could very well just be signifying that you buy the Switch 1 edition of the game and you're playing it on Switch 1, and then you upgrade to a Switch 2 later on. You pop in your cartridge, you want to upgrade that same edition, and it would have an upgrade pack available. Even that would be considered an in-game purchase, if I'm not mistaken. So lots of different things that could be. I wouldn't read too much into it, but Metroid Prime 4 is getting closer nonetheless, and I personally am here for it day one as soon as it comes out. It's very likely to go down as my 2025 game of the year when it's all said and done, and that's competing against Donkey Kong Bonanza and Clair Obscur Expedition 33 right now, which both of those extremely hard to top, but I do think Metroid Prime 4 is probably going to do it for me. Okay, so from here we have Hollow Knight Silksong is coming out in 2 weeks. After years of speculation, Silksong is coming out soon. And then you have from VGC announced in a new trailer, the game is coming out on September 4th, 2025. The game is coming to PS5, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series, Nintendo Switch 2, and PC. The game will be added to Xbox Game Pass on day one. And you do have the brand new trailer below, and there's actually quite a bit of backstory and stuff that I'll kind of just briefly summarize for you guys while you're watching the new trailer, and some gameplay footage that I'll have. Any gameplay footage we use from Gamescom and all of that, I'll have the full links to those videos and credit to the creators down below and all of that that captured that footage, because it's looking excellent on the Switch 2, and we'll mention a feature of the game in a moment. But while there was a lot of speculation about what's causing the delay for Hollow Knight Silksong and all of that different kind of stuff, There has been some comments circulating online. It was never stuck or anything. It was always progressing. It's just the case that we're a small team and games take a lot of time. There wasn't any big controversial moment behind it. We're very fortunate that we have a development method that is so enjoyable. The team already has some ambitious plans ahead for post-launch / extra content to come for Silksong. So there was a Bloomberg article circulating with those exact quotes from the Team Cherry lead himself. So yeah, there was no big restart of the game or like a huge, can't get this figured out, can't understand how to make it run correctly on hardware. Just a lot of time and love put into the polish of the game, finalizing the entire vision of it. Obviously, they're launching on all platforms on the same day on October 4th, 2025. So lots of optimization to get across all of the various different platforms and making sure there's no bugs and glitches. A finished game like what we like to see, and which is sadly sometimes a rarity in modern gaming, but something that doesn't need a day one patch or a lot of updates post-release. This is presumably going to be a great content complete game day one. It runs and looks great. In fact, on Nintendo Switch 2, I mentioned this briefly in yesterday's video, but in case you missed it, Hollow Knight Silksong does fully support 120 FPS on Switch 2. And what a great title to drop just in time for us to kind of be enjoying, a brand new Metroidvania top peak game like this and have the ability to play it in handheld at 120 hertz refresh rate. That's just going to be awesome. And listen, everything that everybody is saying about this game from the hands-on impressions so far is top-notch positive. It does appear to pack a punch in the difficulty department, so get ready to die a lot. I know I will be. I love Metroidvanias that are challenging, and I do think that this is going to be a masterclass of that. And in case if you wondered how Team Cherry could stay afloat this whole time developing it as long as they have, well, there's also this news that came out via the Bloomberg article where Team Cherry announces that Hollow Knight has surpassed a milestone of 15 million copies sold to date as of August 2025. So the original Hollow Knight actually surpassing 15 million copies. That's insane. Team Cherry does quite literally have one of these massive franchises on their hands now, and I don't think they probably would have ever expected it to become that. So to get the follow-up to Hollow Knight with Silksong releasing as soon as September 4th, I didn't expect a release date out that early. I will definitely be picking up that game day one, doing a review for you all on the channel. I think I saw some headlines floating around as well that media is not getting any kind of review units in ahead of time or anything like that either, because they wanted to make sure that Kickstarter backers and people who have supported them, that nobody gets to play it earlier than them. So they're just dropping it across the board, no reviews going into it. Now that's, obviously that can be a good or a bad thing depending on the quality of the game. I'm not too worried about it with this particular one, but nonetheless, I'll have a first impression / review video type of thing go live as soon as I can, as soon as that game drops and I can get through far enough to really kind of get a grasp on what's going on with it. So make sure you're subscribed from that. But I personally cannot wait for Hollow Knight Silksong on the Switch 2, especially knowing it supports things like 120 FPS on handheld mode. I'm ready to play through it right now. So September 4th can't get here fast enough for me. To close this out here, a big update from yesterday's video that we talked about where, yes, it does not appear that Elden Ring on Nintendo Switch 2 was looking good at all. In fact, you can see headlines like this over at VGC where it says Elden Ring on Switch 2 drops to 15 FPS in handheld mode. It's claimed, I can't recommend you playing Elden Ring on Switch in this state, says one journalist. And the thing is that it didn't only come from one journalist. Like, we did talk about this in yesterday's video, so we won't deep dive it again, but Nintendo Life, Good Vibes Gaming, all these different media publications and outlets, IGN, just about anybody that went hands-on with the handheld version of Elden Ring were reporting that the frame rate was just unbearable and not good. Even this person getting to play both, which is worth talking about. So not sure who needs to hear this still, but man, I played Elden Ring in handheld mode on Nintendo Switch 2. I'm a little heartbroken. The frame rate isn't great, not even in the slightest. Nate the Hate did actually respond to this and say no docked impressions, and he goes, it's all right, no problems there really. And that's actually kind of the big update to this, because we do have Nintendo Everything sharing out that there's new footage of Elden Ring in docked mode, and I will share this full screen for you guys, and shout outs to MD14. I'll have his YouTube channel linked in the description down below. He is the originator of this content, but he does make it past the tutorial into Limgrave, where all of the different reports were popping up online that there was severe frame stutter, and anytime you're moving the camera around, you see it almost look like an N64 game where it's dropping down to 20 frames per second, potentially as low as 15 frames per second. And fortunately, in docked play, you do not notice any of that stuff. Now, I will say the visual fidelity of this game actually looks good. In fact, it almost looks to me, and it's hard to tell when you're capturing it off screen, to be fair, it almost looks to me like maybe they prioritized, the better looking visuals and textures and just haven't ironed out that FPS overall yet. And it doesn't mean that that can't be ironed out before the game actually launches, because this game's not out yet. And there was some similar reports going on from Cyberpunk 2077 where people were saying it was bad in handheld play. And of course, Cyberpunk is a more visually demanding game on Switch 2, and we saw that optimized. So it's not saying that Elden Ring will be broken at launch, but it's also a little bit concerning, and I think a valid reason to be concerned as somebody who, you see the reports of like Madden 26 not looking and running great on the Switch 2. Then we have games like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero getting the confirmation that it's barely an upgrade in terms of performance and resolution from what the Switch 1 version is. And it's not to say that the Switch 2 isn't powerful enough to handle this stuff, but if it's one of those type of situations where developers are having to jump through so many hoops just to get their games to run correctly on the Switch 2, that's not a good look either. And it could just be a learning curve of the new hardware and them trying to rush out and meet dates and all of that stuff. But we do know that lazy ports happen when a game should and could run better, but we still get it shipped to us in a pretty broken state. And I really hope that that is not the case for such a massive title like Elden Ring Tarnished Edition, where we actually have a FromSoft exclusive game to look forward to in that of Duskbloods for 2026. And I'm not clear on if FromSoft is handling this port in-house or if this is something that would be handled by a third party potentially or somebody else involved. But let's just hope that if it is FromSoft, they're learning the dev kit in and out for Switch 2, because we don't want to see something where you have to worry about going down to as low as 15 frames per second in handheld play, because that is a big selling point of the Switch 2. And even though it does not appear to be near as bad in docked mode, we want this thing at least a solid 30 FPS, if not higher than that in docked mode especially. I would almost think that 40 FPS or even something like 60 FPS with a performance mode where the textures are not quite as clear, but you get a higher performance mode. That kind of stuff I would love to see as an option for the Switch 2 version, because listen, if you're a Souls-like player like I am, reaction time and dodge rolling, everything that is all paramount to that game's mechanics. Like, you have to have things react in real time. You have to feel like it is the second that you are hitting the button is when your character is responding to that. And, a janky frame rate is not going to make for a good experience in a Souls-like game, just due to the difficulty nature of them and everything like that. So we'll see what happens with Elden Ring. This is still something that, because we don't know the game's launch date, they may continue to let it cook until something like December. And listen, at that point, we might be playing a whole different end product. So I did at least like to see the reports that we don't have to worry about docked performance being near as bad as all of those initial reports. So I did want to definitely get you guys on the same page with that more updated information around it, as this is one that I'm very much looking forward to picking up for my Switch 2 and playing through again. So let me know in the comments down below what you make of all the different stories. Are you excited for Metroid Prime 4? And will you be picking it up once we learn the release date of that game? Do you think it's a November game and it doubles up with Kirby Air Riders? Do you think that it's maybe a December game and or a late October game? Or do you think that it's still actually going to get pushed to 2026 and that it's actually not in Nintendo's 2025 lineup? What do you think about Silksong coming out September 4th? And are you picking up that game day one? And your impressions so far with everything you've seen online for Elden Ring Tarnished Edition. Have you looked at any of the footage, and are you concerned about this game at launch, or do you think it's going to get ironed out before we see FromSoft and Bandai Namco ultimately ship the game? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.